The Kobolds and Catacombs release made a large impact on Hearthstone, and Wild was no exception. Our last expansion, Knights of the Frozen Throne, created a meta where Reno Priest was the undisputed ruler. However, this expansion gave strong tools to decks waiting for their turn in the spotlight. These 5 Kings of the Wild are powerful enough to force the direction the meta changes, with deck builders all too aware of their flexibility and dominance. Let's take a look at what these decks are and how they've affected the game on the Wild side of Hearthstone. Reno Priest had a significant hold on the meta prior to Kobolds and Catacombs. So much so that you need to tech your decks to seal the game out early before Reno Priest could get its combo off. The other alternative was to play the archetype yourself. Reno Priest's insane power level comes from 2 Wild exclusive cards, Reno Jackson and Spawn of Shadows. The most common way to beat this deck in Standard is to beat them before they draw the standard OTK combo of Velen, Mind Blast, and cheap spells. In Wild, aggro strategies are stronger than in Standard, but Reno Jackson seals games out by forcing your opponent to kill you by turn 6. This card alone turns the win rate of some aggro matchups to the Reno deck's favor. More importantly, however, is Spawn of Shadows. This is the card that makes the Wild version of this deck a King of the Wild. Every Shadow Reaper Anduin hero power with this card on the field hits your opponent for 6 damage. You only need to play 5 cards for an OTK from 30 health. With the card only costing 4 mana, it is a surprisingly easy task. From the latest expansion, Reno Priest only got one standout addition to the archetype, which is Psychic Scream. This card is quite strong and an easy inclusion in the Wild version of the deck. But in Wild, we have Light Bomb, which already answered some of the threats Psychic Scream neutralizes. We still consider it the top deck on the Wild ladder for now, but it's not miles ahead of other decks in the meta, as others have risen to contest the Shadow Reaper and Raza combo. Cubelock makes a refreshing appearance among the Kings of the Wild. Kobolds and Catacombs made it possible for a non-Reno control Warlock deck to be good enough to make the Wild meta snapshot. The core of Cubelock is powerful in Standard, but with the Wild exclusive additions of Mal'Ganis and Voidcaller, the deck soars above its Standard counterpart. They provide greater consistency in Cubelock's ability to cheat out powerful demons in the mid-game, with access to a wider range of late-game threats which can be summoned even earlier. Bloodreaver Gul'dan can now resurrect an even greater demonic army when played. When building a deck in the Kobold and Catacombs Wild meta, players have to consider Cubelock's explosive strategy and what they can do to counter it. Otherwise, if your opponents enter the Wild unprepared, a horde of Doom Guards can make short work of them. Prior to this expansion, the go-to Paladin deck on the ladder was Dude Paladin, which relied on Silverhand Recruit synergies to overwhelm their opponent with waves of minions. However, when Kobolds and Catacombs was released, Psychic Scream made this style of Paladin less effective for climbing. This resulted in the development of a more aggressive core, turning the deck into the current version of Aggro Paladin. This archetype relies heavily on the new card Call to Arms, which is even more effective in Wild thanks to Haunted Creeper, Shielded Minibot, and Ship's Cannon. These 2 drops push this archetype into a position to compete with the best that the ladder can throw at it. Aggro Paladin has also adopted Corridor Creeper, arguably one of the strongest neutral cards in either Standard or Wild, giving greater early game and board recovery options for one of our 2 aggro Kings of the Wild. Our second one is Aggro Druid, which has traditionally been successful in Wild and often sits among the top of the Wild tier lists. Cards from Kobolds and Catacombs synergized well with the strong core of the deck, most notably Corridor Creeper and Dire Mole. Some adventurous players are even teching in a single copy of Branching Paths. While these new cards help to supplement the deck, there are stronger cards which put Aggro Druid at such a high power level in the Wild format, especially Sir Finley Murgleton and Jeeves. Sir Finley allows you to change from the not-so-aggressive Shapeshift hero power to some of the more useful ones like Life Tap or Steady Shot. Jeeves also has great synergy with the Aggro Druid strategy, as you often find yourself with an empty hand towards the mid to late game. Even getting 2 more cards and a 1/4 body allows you to keep pressuring your opponent for those last turns to close out the game and assert your dominance in the Wild format. Resurrect Priest completes our Kings of the Wild list, with its power level reaching greater heights with the new Diamond Spellstone card. Resurrect Priest is the Wild version of Standard's Big Priest, and they're almost identical in playstyle, except that you have more cheap summoning effects with the Wild exclusive card Resurrect, and you have better late-game threats that apply greater pressure like Ragnaros. The Spellstone also allows for the deck to use fewer, yet stronger large threats, allowing players to cut out extra ones you needed in the deck before Kobolds and Catacombs for late game consistency like Ysera. This access to revive effects, Resurrect, Eternal Servitude, Diamond Spellstone, paired with cheating out large minions, Barnes and Shadow Essence, allows you to summon up large threats turn after turn once they have begun to hit the board. While the minions are a huge part of the deck, a lot of the deck's success is owed to the wide range of single target and AoE removal, such as the Shadow Words, Pain, Death, and Horror, Light Bomb, and Psychic Scream. Silence and Dispel also help keep Cubelock in check, while the constant summoning of large threats puts significant pressure on Reno Priest. Though it struggles against most aggressive decks, there's a wide range of healing and removal options that allow the deck to adapt to most meta states, making Resurrection Priest our last King of the Wild for this list. Kobolds and Catacombs has raised the stakes in Wild. The meta is now like an all-star game where Hearthstone's strongest decks compete to see which is the best of them all. Our 5 Kings of the Wild are among the most flexible and powerful decks in the game, but even up-and-comers such as OTK Malygos Druid, Giant Lock, and Reno Mage are beginning to rise and disrupt their reign. The boundaries of deck styles continue to be pushed, forcing decks to adapt or fall behind. Our Kings of the Wild are strong, but innovative deck building and accurate meta reads make it possible for any deck to shake the tier lists and climb the Wild ladder. Thank you for watching this peek into the Wild metagame. Be sure to subscribe to Tempo Storm Hearthstone for the latest deck introductions, strategy content, and more, including our upcoming Wild Meta Snapshot.